All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today.
Fascinating and complex.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're talking about Jammu and Kashmir and its special status within India.
Right, and we're going deep.
Beyond the headlines.
Exactly.
Pulling insights from legal texts, historical records, the real deal,
To really understand what makes J&K's relationship with India so unique.
A unique case study for sure.
Yeah, so whether you're prepping for the UPSC, trying to nail those tough questions.
Absolutely crucial for those exams.
Or just someone who wants to, just understand this complex region better.
This deep dive is for you.
It is.
It's a story that I find fascinating.
Me too.
It's integration. It's autonomy.
And a lot of legal and historical twists and turns.
Oh yeah, so many layers.
Okay, so let's untangle some of these threads.
Sounds good.
Our sources are clear on this.
Yeah, let's lay the foundation.
Article 1 of the Indian Constitution. It says, Jammu and Kashmir IS, a part of India.
No doubt about it.
But then we hit Article 370.
And that's where things get interesting.
All right, this is what we call special status.
Sets J&K apart from all other Indian states.
Right, granting it a level of autonomy you won't find anywhere else.
Think about this.
Yeah.
J&K is the only Indian state with its own separate constitution.
Wow, a separate constitution.
Huge deal.
It is. We know some other states have, special provisions.
Right, but nothing quite like this.
Not even close.
This is fundamental how J&K functions within the Indian Union.
So how did this come about?
Well, we have to go back to 1947.
1947, India's independence.
A time of massive change, uncertainty, especially for princely states like J&K.
So much up in the air back then.
Absolutely.
What did Maharaja Hari Singh, the ruler of J&K, what did he do?
Well, initially, she chose independence.
Oh, really?
He wanted J&K to go its own way, a separate course.
Wow, a bold move.
It was, but then things took a dramatic turn.
What happened?
The attack by Azad Kashmir forces, supported by Pakistan, changed everything.
So this attack basically forced his hand.
Absolutely. Faced with this aggression, he signed the Instrument of Accession with India.
To get protection and support.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The accession was conditional.
Conditional accession.
Yeah, that's a key point.
What were the conditions?
The main condition was that the people of J&K, through their own constituent assembly, would decide their internal constitution and their relationship with India.
Wow, so that's where Article 370 comes in.
Exactly. It was a direct response to this unique situation.
And initially, it was meant to be temporary.
That's right, but it's been shaping things for decades.
It has. So let's unpack Article 370 a bit.
Let's do it.
Our sources highlight some key provisions.
Yeah, things you really need to understand.
Okay, hit us with them.
All right, so first of all, Article 370 basically says J&K doesn't have to follow the same rules as other states.
Like a separate set of rules.
Exactly. Specifically those that were originally categorized as Part B states,
Right, so it's like J&K is in its own lane.
Exactly, a separate legal lane.
Okay, what else?
Well, it really limits the Indian Parliament's power to make laws for J&K.
Limits their power.
Yeah, their legislative reach is restricted to matters specifically mentioned in the Instrument of Accession. Things like defense, external affairs, communications.
Okay, so those are givens.
Right, or to areas where the J&K government says, okay, you can make laws here.
So it's a very carefully defined sphere of influence.
Exactly. J&K keeps a lot of legislative autonomy.
Okay, so what about other provisions of the Indian Constitution?
Well, that's interesting. Any other provision, even if it's modified, can only be extended to J&K with their consent.
J&K has to agree.
Consultation or concurrence, it's right there in the text. J&K has a voice.
They get a say in how they integrate.
Absolutely. And here's a big one.
Yeah.
Article 370 itself.
Yeah.
It can only be revoked on the recommendation of J&K's Constituent Assembly.
But wait, didn't you say that doesn't exist anymore?
I did, and that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Wow.
Yeah, it raises questions about how you even change this special status.
Right. How do you amend it or revoke it?
Exactly. And these questions have fueled debates for years.
So even changing this special status is tricky.
It is. We're just scratching the surface here. This whole setup is intricate.
It really is. This web of legal provisions, the history, the political aspirations, it all makes J&K's status in India so fascinating.
Fascinating and complex. A real case study.
Okay, we've laid some groundwork here, but there's more to explore.
So much more.
Like, how does Article 370 play out on a daily basis?
Right. What are the practical implications?
Exactly. So stay with us as we keep going with this deep dive.
It's going to be a fascinating ride. It's one thing to read about Article 370
Right.
and J&K's special status,
Yeah.
but it's another to see how it works, in practice.
Totally. Like, we've got the blueprint now. Let's see the actual building.
Exactly. And that brings us to something called the Constitution Application to Jammu and Kashmir Order.
Okay, 1954.
1954, that's the one.
So this order, it's like the how-to guide for Article 370
You could say that for a while.
and how J&K functions within India.
Exactly. Lays out the ground rules.
Okay, and this impacts the Indian Parliament's power, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To make laws for J&K,
Big time. We touched on it earlier, but it's worth revisiting.
especially for those UPSC folks. They need to know this stuff inside and out.
Yeah, those legal nuances are key.
So Article 370 already limits the Parliament's power, right?
It does.
But this 1954 order, it kind of clarifies things further.
It spells it out, which central laws apply, which don't.
So it's like drawing boundaries, making sure J&K's autonomy is protected.
Precisely, and this affects all sorts of things.
Like what?
Well, even citizenship laws are different in J&K.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the whole concept of permanent residence comes into play.
Ah, right. Permanent residence, and there's special rights. We've mentioned it, but what does that even mean?
It's a good question. The J&K Constitution defines it. We'll get to that. But basically, it's about ancestral ties to the state.
Okay, so not just being born there.
Right. It's deeper than that. Residing there for a certain time, property rights, things like that.
So it's about a historical connection to the land.
Exactly. And with that status comes special rights.
Like what?
Owning land, holding certain government jobs, even scholarships.
Wow, so it's almost like a separate category of citizenship within India.
In a way, yeah. And this has been a source of debate, legal challenges, the whole thing.
Makes sense. Some people might see it as unfair, two-tiered citizenship.
Exactly. Undermining equality, that sort of argument.
So even though J&K is a part of India, its residents have a unique legal identity.
They do, and that's reflected in J&K's own constitution.
Right, we keep talking about this separate constitution.
It's a fascinating document. It shows J&K's desire for self-governance.
While still being a part of India.
Exactly, that balancing act.
So how does it actually differ from the Indian constitution?
Well, for one thing, it clearly states that J&K is an integral part of India.
Okay, no ambiguity there.
Nope, but it also defines permanent resident and all those special rights.
All right, so connected to India, but with its own distinct identity.
Exactly, and it also lays out the structure of government.
Okay, like how?
It has a bicameral legislature, just like the Indian parliament, but with its own quirks.
2 houses, right? I remember that from my UPSC days.
That's it. You've got the Legislative Assembly, the lower house, directly elected.
Okay.
But here's a twist. Some seats are reserved for areas under Pakistani administration.
Wow. A reminder of those territorial disputes.
Exactly. It's woven into the structure.
In the upper house.
That's the Legislative Council, a mix of directly and indirectly elected members.
Okay. And some nominated by the governor.
Right. A blend of different systems adds to the complexity.
For sure. Speaking of the governor, is that role similar to other states?
In many ways, yes. Appointed by the president, head of state.
Okay, standard stuff.
But there are some J&K twists, of course.
I figured.
Remember those old titles before 1953?
Sadari Riyasat, Wazir-e-Azam.
Those are the ones. They used to be the head of state and head of government.
Such a sense of history there.
Absolutely. And even though they were changed to governor and chief minister in 65, some people want them back.
It's about identity, pushing back against assimilation.
Exactly. Every word, every title becomes symbolic.
Wow, and this sensitivity to language, it goes beyond titles.
It does. Even the official language of J&K is different.
What is it?
Urdu sets it apart from other states.
So we're talking about a state within a nation, its own constitution, legislature, language.
It's remarkable. Article 370 really allowed J&K to create its own space.
It did, but it's not just symbolic. There are practical effects, too.
Right, how the state actually functions.
Give me some examples.
Well, think about emergencies, like Article 356 of the Indian Constitution.
President's rule.
Exactly. The central government can intervene if a state's in trouble.
Right, breakdown of constitutional machinery.
But in J&K, because of Article 370, the president can't just do that unilaterally.
J&K's government has to agree.
They have to concur. So even in a crisis, their autonomy is somewhat protected.
Interesting. And what about financial emergencies?
Same thing. The president can't just declare one in J&K.
Wow, so it's a whole different set of rules.
It is a different playbook.
And this goes for the legal system, too, right?
Absolutely. The J&K High Court, it's similar to others, but with key distinctions.
Like what?
Well, its power to issue writs is more limited.
Writs, refresh my memory.
Legal orders from courts protecting fundamental rights.
Right.
In other states, high courts can issue them broadly, but in J&K, it's strictly for enforcing those rights.
Okay, so that's a big difference. Why is that?
Again, it's about that balance, preserving J&K's autonomy.
Preventing too much interference from the central government.
Exactly. Another example of how the legal framework is tailored for J&K.
It's fascinating. This whole special status, it's not fixed, it's evolved.
Oh yeah, shaped by history, legal interpretations, political desires.
Understanding that evolution is key to really grasping this relationship.
It's a journey for sure.
We've covered a lot. Article 370, the J&K Constitution, how it all works.
A lot of details.
But we can't forget the history.
The foundation of it all.
What led to this unique arrangement in the first place?
Right, back to 1947 and all that.
Ready for a history lesson?
Let's do it. History's the context for everything we've talked about.
All right, so back to 1947.
Yeah, a pivotal year.
Huge changes happening.
The end of British rule.
India gaining independence.
And for princely states like Jammu and Kashmir,
It was a crossroads.
a real turning point.
Imagine being Maharaja Hari Singh,
Yeah,
the ruler of J&K.
the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders.
So much pressure, so much uncertainty.
Absolutely. India and Pakistan, as we know them, they were just forming.
The future was wide open.
Full of potential, but also potential conflict.
What a time.
It was.
So what did Maharaja Hari Singh do? Did he join India or Pakistan?
Initially, he chose neither. He wanted independence for J&K, a sovereign nation.
Oh, wow. Going it alone.
A bold move, but as we know, things didn't quite go as planned.
Right. History had other ideas, so what changed?
Well, the attack by Azad Kashmir forces, backed by Pakistan, that was a game changer.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
It changed everything.
Forced his hand.
Absolutely. Faced with that aggression, he realized independence wasn't an option.
He needed help.
He did, and he turned to India.
So that attack led to J&K's accession to India.
It was the catalyst, no doubt.
But it wasn't a simple merger?
No, not at all.
We know there were conditions.
Right, and this is crucial. The people of J&K, through their own constituent assembly, would get to decide their relationship with India.
Okay, their level of autonomy.
Exactly, that was the deal. And that's the basis for Article 370.
It all goes back to that one event.
It does the attack.
It set everything in motion.
Changed the course of history for J&K.
And those historical events are key to understanding the debates today.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about laws. It's about the history, the emotions, the politics.
Everything's intertwined.
It is. So let's look at some attempts to reshape this relationship.
Okay, like what?
Well, the J&K Autonomy Resolution of 2000, that was a big one.
The J&K Legislative Assembly, they wanted more autonomy, right?
A lot more. They wanted to go back to their pre-1953 status.
Wow, a major shift.
It was. They wanted temporary removed from Article 370, less power for the Indian Parliament in J&K, even a return to those old titles for the governor and chief minister.
So basically a push for more self-governance, a stronger sense of identity.
Exactly. But the Indian government said no.
They rejected it.
Completely. They saw it as going too far.
It's that balance again.
Always that balance.
Integration versus autonomy.
It's the core tension in the J&K story.
Okay, and then there was that group of interlocutors in 2010.
Right. They were supposed to find some common ground.
Led by Dilip Pedgaonkar, right?
That's him. A group of mediators talking to different people in J&K, exploring solutions.
What a tough job.
It was. Lots of different perspectives, strong feelings.
So what did they come up with?
Well, one big idea was a constitutional committee.
To do what?
To review all those central laws and articles of the Indian Constitution that had been extended to J&K since 1952, the Delhi Agreement.
Okay, so basically checking if J&K's special status had been eroded.
Exactly. Had the state government's powers been limited?
Like an audit of the relationship.
Yeah, you could say that.
And they wanted some symbolic changes too, right?
They did, removing temporary from Article 370, clarifying the governor's appointment, things like that.
But they didn't touch those special rights for permanent residents.
No, that was too sensitive.
They were walking a tightrope.
Definitely more about dialogue than drastic action.
And their recommendations weren't binding.
Nope, the government could take them or leave them.
And as we know, the situation in J&K, it's still evolving.
Absolutely. The debate continues.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. The history, the special status, the challenges.
A lot of ground.
It's complex.
It is, but it's crucial to understand.
Especially for those UPSC aspirants out there.
Right. This is important stuff.
It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about understanding the nuances, the history, the different viewpoints.
J&K's story, it teaches us that history is alive, it shapes our present, influences our future.
It does, and as we wrap up, we leave you with a question.
A question to think about.
What does the future hold for Jammu and Kashmir and its relationship with India?
It's a tough question.
No easy answers.
But it's a question worth asking.